The search and the call. It had been weeks since I started looking for a car. My son, turning 18 in a few days, was asking for something special. A car, of course. It wasn't a surprise. The kid was a good student, hard-working, and deserved something to mark the occasion. But there was a problem. Money. I didn't have much of it, and the idea of buying something decent seemed impossible. I scoured every dealership within 50 miles, checked local papers, and even asked friends. But nothing looked right. Most cars were either overpriced or falling apart. I kept thinking back to my own first car, something old but reliable, and I wanted to give that to my son. So, when I saw the listing on Craigslist, I thought maybe this was the answer. The ad was simple. A 2003 Toyota Camry, cheap, listed by someone named Earl. The price was suspiciously low, but there was something about it that caught my eye. The Camry was listed as, in great condition, runs perfectly. And the best part? The listing had pictures. It looked clean, solid. But why so cheap? Maybe there was something wrong with it that Earl hadn't mentioned. I didn't know, but I wasn't going to pass up the chance without at least seeing it for myself. I dialed the number listed in the ad, and the voice on the other end was calm, unassuming. A man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, answered with a friendly tone. He introduced himself as Earl and confirmed the Camry was still available. I asked him about the car's condition, and he reassured me it was in perfect shape. No issues at all, just needed to get rid of it fast. He even seemed eager, which in retrospect should have made me pause. But in that moment, I just wanted to believe. My son's birthday was fast approaching, and I couldn't disappoint him. "Everything's fine with it. You'll see when you get here," Earl said. He gave me directions to his place, a rural property that sounded a little too far off the beaten path. But at that point, I was willing to drive just about anywhere for the right car. I decided to go the next day. The air was thick with anticipation as I pulled into the long, dusty driveway. The place was much further out than I expected, nestled in an area so remote it felt like I'd driven off the map. There were no other houses nearby, just trees and open fields stretching on for miles. The house itself was small, weathered, and secluded. No neighbors, no noise. I couldn't help but feel a strange unease as I parked my car and stepped out. The absence of any other cars or people gave the whole place an eerie emptiness, as though it was waiting for something. The first thing I noticed when I stepped toward the house was the pickup truck parked at the end of the driveway. No Camry in sight. It didn't make sense, but maybe Earl had it parked somewhere else. Still, I felt a knot in my stomach. I approached the front door, knocked a few times, and waited. No answer. I knocked again and then again. The silence hung in the air. It wasn't exactly a comfortable silence, though. It felt thick, oppressive, as if something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe this was just how rural folk lived. I looked through a window by the door and caught a glimpse of movement. There was someone inside, a figure, standing still by the back door. I couldn't make out any details, but the figure was unmistakable. I figured Earl must have been busy and couldn't get to the door in time. Still, something about it didn't sit right with me. The figure stood there far too still, almost like a mannequin, unmoving. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even though the figure was clearly just standing there in the dark. Against my better judgment, I decided to go around the back. Maybe I could get a better view, maybe the guy would finally show up. But the closer I got, the more I felt that something was horribly wrong. My heart began to race. I had no explanation for it, but my instincts told me to leave. Fast, but curiosity, or maybe just the sheer stubbornness of a father wanting to give his son a gift, kept me moving forward. Chapter 2. A strange encounter. I moved around the side of the house, my feet crunching against the gravel underfoot. There was something about the place that was making my skin crawl. The silence around me felt too heavy, too still, like the whole world was holding its breath. I couldn't explain why, but I had a deep, unsettling feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way the house was so isolated, or the fact that Earl hadn't answered the door after so many knocks. But I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. I walked along the narrow path that led to the back of the house, my mind still trying to make sense of things. The figure by the window had been so still, almost lifeless. It didn't add up, and I had to know what it was. I was already halfway around the house when I saw it again. The same figure, standing motionless by the back door. It didn't move, not even a slight twitch. I felt my stomach tighten as I approached, unsure whether I should call out to it or just leave. But my feet kept moving, as if some invisible force was pulling me toward it. I got closer, my heartbeat loud in my ears. The figure was standing at an odd angle, facing away from me, its back to the door. It was so perfectly still that it almost looked like a mannequin, but something about it didn't feel right. It wasn't the angle of the body or the unnatural stillness. It was the sense that it was too still, too lifelike. I froze, just a few steps away from it, and I tried to look closer. That's when I saw it, something I hadn't expected, something I couldn't comprehend at first. It wasn't a person at all. It was a taxidermied human being, preserved in grotesque, lifelike detail. Its skin had a waxy, unnatural sheen to it, and its posture was rigid, almost frozen in time. It wasn't even standing properly. Its body was contorted in a way that didn't make sense for a living person. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped back, my legs weak beneath me. I was standing in front of a lifeless figure, but it wasn't a mannequin. It was real, and it wasn't supposed to be there. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. My brain was struggling to process what I was seeing. I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and explain this, to tell me that it was some twisted prank or a piece of art. But no one came. The house behind me was still quiet, the air thick with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. My mind raced with questions, none of them making sense. Why would someone do this? And why would Earl have it out in the open like this? I turned, ready to leave, when I heard it. A faint scraping sound from inside the house, the kind of noise you'd hear if someone were dragging something across the floor. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. I glanced back at the taxidermied figure, my breath coming faster now, and I could feel a cold sweat trickling down my back. Someone was inside, and they knew I was here. I felt it then, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I was being watched, from behind those blinds, from the dark corners of the house. I couldn't explain how I knew, but I knew. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run before whatever was lurking inside came out. But I was frozen, staring at that lifeless figure. Was it a warning? A message? Or was I just overreacting? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. Something wasn't right here, and I had to get out before it was too late. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, staring at that lifeless figure. My mind was scrambling to make sense of it all. The figure was so disturbingly real, too real. I couldn't bring myself to look away, but something in the pit of my stomach told me that I should. Every part of me screamed to run, to get out of there, but my feet stayed planted, as if the horror was somehow keeping me in place. Then I heard it again. The scraping sound. It was louder this time, unmistakable. Something was moving inside the house. I could feel my pulse quicken. The rational part of my mind, the part that told me I should leave, was drowned out by the fear crawling up my spine. Someone was in there, watching me. I wasn't alone. I took a shaky step back, still staring at the figure. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, but I stopped myself. What was I going to do, call the police? Would they even believe me? I hadn't seen anything concrete yet, just a bizarre figure and a strange noise. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like something wrong, something dangerous. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I heard the faintest sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from inside the house. The noise grew louder, closer. I couldn't tell if it was just my imagination running wild or if it was real. But in that moment, I knew it wasn't my imagination. I wasn't alone. Someone or something was moving inside, and it was aware of me. I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. I slowly, cautiously, looked over my shoulder toward the back door. Through the slats of the blinds, I saw it. Movement. The faintest shift in the shadows, the shape of someone standing just out of sight. My heart slammed against my chest. They were watching me. And worse, I was certain they knew I had seen them. I don't know how I knew, but I could feel their gaze pressing into me, cold and predatory. I didn't think. I just acted. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay. I couldn't wait to find out what was lurking inside that house. I turned and ran, not caring how loud my steps were, not caring about anything except the desperate need to get away. My only focus was getting to my car, getting in, and leaving that house, and whatever was inside, behind. I didn't look back. Not once. I couldn't. All I could hear was the sound of my feet pounding against the gravel, my breath ragged in my chest. I reached my car in what felt like an eternity, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly unlock the door. I slammed it shut behind me, heart hammering in my ears. I didn't dare glance at the house again, but I knew someone was watching me from that window. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I didn't need to understand it to know that I had narrowly escaped something that I didn't want to confront. The engine roared to life as I tore out of the driveway, tires screeching against the gravel. I didn't care how fast I was driving. I didn't care about anything except putting as much distance between myself and that house as possible. What had I walked into? What kind of person keeps something like that in their house? I couldn't wrap my head around it. All I knew was that I had gotten too close, and if I hadn't left when I did, I would have never gotten out at all. I didn't stop driving until I had left that place, far behind me. The road blurred in front of me, my grip white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my mind racing to process what had just happened. I glanced in the rearview mirror once, half expecting to see the house still looming in the distance, but all I saw was open road. I couldn't bring myself to slow down, even when the car's engine hummed steadily under my foot. My heart wouldn't calm. I could still see that figure, stiff, lifeless, grotesque, and I could still feel the eyes of whoever was inside, watching me as I fled. I didn't know how far I'd driven, or even which direction I was headed. All I knew was that I couldn't turn back. The thought of that house, of the thing I'd seen in the yard and the strange sounds coming from inside, kept playing in my mind over and over. The taxidermied figure had been enough to send me into a panic, but the real horror had come after, knowing someone was inside, someone who had to be aware of me, someone who had been waiting. I wasn't just worried about the car anymore. I wasn't even worried about the birthday gift. I was worried about me. I began to wonder if I had imagined parts of it. The scraping sounds, the figure in the window, the feeling of being watched, it all felt too unreal. But then my thoughts turned darker. What if everything had been real? What if the ad had been a trap, designed to lure people like me in? People just looking for a deal, a simple car. I had walked right into it, right into their home. I had been this close to becoming another piece of whatever twisted collection they had inside. And for a moment, I could hear the soft scrape again, echoing in my ears like it was following me. I had been lucky, too lucky. That thought hit me like a cold wave. If I hadn't made the decision to leave, to run when I did, I might not have gotten out. That house wasn't just a strange property. It was a trap. I didn't know how many other people had come before me, how many had been tricked into stepping into that place. But I was sure that figure, that horrifying display, was meant as a warning. It wasn't just some creepy decoration. It was a message. What worried me more than the figure, though, was the question I couldn't stop asking. Why had I been so blind? Why hadn't I seen the warning signs earlier? The too good to be true car ad, the isolated location, the lack of any real proof that Earl even owned the Camry. It was all there, staring me in the face, but I had ignored it, too eager to believe that this might be the answer to all my problems. My son deserved better than that. And I'd almost let him down. When I finally pulled into a gas station, my hands were still trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I could see the faintest outline of the car's rear-view mirror, and I noticed how pale my face looked under the harsh station lights. I leaned against the car, the quiet of the station only making the memories sharper, more vivid. I could almost still hear the scrape, the footsteps, the awful feeling of being hunted. I never did go back to that house. I never told anyone the full story, either. I didn't think anyone would believe me, not without proof, not without a body to show them. But I knew the truth. I had narrowly escaped something that could have been far worse than I had imagined. And the worst part, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to pull down that lonely remote road. I would never trust another Craigslist ad again.